I always like to start these types of conversations with saying technology is wonderful and incredible, but if you don't have the partnerships built in place, the technology won't take you anywhere.
Today on LawNext, Judge Scott Schlegel, a district court judge in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, who, well before the coronavirus crisis, was innovating in the delivery of justice online. And interestingly, he does it almost entirely using readily available off-the-shelf technology products. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to today's interview in just a moment. But first, let's hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, on to this week's interview. Judge Schlegel, welcome to LawNext.
Well, thank you for having me, Bob. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I really appreciate your doing this. Judge, suddenly courts everywhere are grappling with how to continue to deliver justice in a world of sheltering in place. But you've been using an array of online tools and services well before any of this happened. You were a former prosecutor. You've been on the bench since 2013, I think it is. And
yep,
so
right.
how did you, were you a techie before you went on the bench? How did you kind of get started doing this stuff?
Yeah, I think I've always loved technology. And so just way of background, as you stated, former prosecutor that handled, thousands of criminal cases, and also practiced at a large downtown law firm doing civil products liability defense before becoming a prosecutor. So, you get to see it from a business perspective, and you also get to see the speed and the volume of cases on the criminal side of it. And so when I took the bench in May of 2013, I always looked at the system as a whole and said, look, I understand the importance of what we're doing here at the courthouse. So how can I make this system more efficient and more effective? And since taking the bench, I started to look at our workflow. Again, if you just remove the different titles, forget about defendant, plaintiff, judge, just remove the titles for a minute and look at your workflow and your business side of what you're doing, and start trying to build in efficiencies by utilizing simple off-the-shelf technologies to do that. And really, that's what I started to do many years ago. And it was very useful, obviously, to give us a springboard now that we actually don't have a physical building to go to at this time, to not only be able to handle emergencies, but to do more than just handle the emergencies, so we can bring some sort of normalcy back to the system of justice that during these tough times.
And you are, just as by way of further background, you are the chair of the specialty courts.
What does that mean? Chair of the specialty courts. So we have a number of specialty courts. Your typical drug court model is one of our specialty courts. We also have a DWI court, a reentry court, a swift and certain probation program. So specialty courts are our high-risk probationers that have multiple felony convictions, and we are trying to help them become successful so that there are no more victims. And that in itself is a challenge when you have the limited amount of individuals and the little amount of resources to get those folks healthy and help them succeed in life. And again, utilizing technologies, we are able to act as one unit with multiple agencies in real time so that we can hold folks accountable, but again, care enough about them to help them succeed in life so that they are no more victims and we can have productive members of our community.
As we speak, we are still largely in a state of sheltering in place throughout the country, and that means the courthouses are, for the most part, closed where you are and where I am as well, and in most places, I guess. So what has that meant for your ability to continue to serve the population that you serve?
It's tough. We are operating in a business that is built around a building. And when you don't have a building, how do you go about your day-to-day business? The system is designed for folks to come to the courthouse, whether that's the civil justice system or the criminal justice system. So how do you do that? And I always like to start these types of conversations with saying technology is wonderful and incredible, but if you don't have the partnerships built in place, the technology won't take you anywhere. And so we are here in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana. We have an incredible partnership with all of our justice partners, whether that's the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, the state probation and parole, the clerk of court, you name it. We all come to the table and say, how can we make our system more efficient and more effective? And because of that, we were able to handle almost all emergencies, if not all emergencies, from the beginning of the building closures, and then begin to build from there, so that now we are handling on the civil side. I can handle a motion in limine or motion for summary judgment. We can handle probable cause determinations with remote detectives testifying. On the criminal side, we can also take remote guilty pleas for those who are incarcerated. Because of those partnerships and because of those layering of technologies, we're able to do a heck of a lot more than simply handle the emergencies as they come up.
Well, it's interesting. I think 2 weeks ago, I had on this show Richard Susskind, who has recently written a book about online courts, and in that book and in the show, he raises this issue of whether courts are a place or a service. And I mean, it seems that you're able to kind of address the situations that you're addressing as a service, even when the place is shut down.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think, again, I am a public servant, and I always look at it from that perspective. Regardless of the individual in front of me, I'm serving that individual, whether I'm serving my community or that defendant or that plaintiff. How can I make the user experience better for you? I understand the importance of my job. Now, remove that from the first consideration. Now, how do I make it better? So from a criminal perspective, if I've got 100 set on my criminal docket, you know what that looks like at 9 o'clock when 100 folks try and walk into your courtroom, Bob? It is an absolute nightmare. So years ago, I stopped doing that. I then started saying, hey, look, you want to come to court at 9, 10, or 11. You're going to come on this date to handle your matter. But would you like to come at 9, 10, or 11? You might have to take the bus. You might have to catch a ride. You might have to drop your children off at school or do something before that 9 o'clock that I'm not going to get to you at 9 o'clock. I'll be on the bench from 9 until 100 cases are resolved. So what time would you like to come? And then I started giving them a time that is convenient for them. And before they left, I would have them put their phone number and their email into a computer that I had set up in my courtroom so that I could send them text and email reminders so we can cut down on the failures to appear, so that our police officers aren't wasting time picking somebody up on a simple attachment, and we can address the matter and leave our police officers on the streets. And that is a simple online calendar that cost me $150 a year.
That was Calendly? Is that what you're using for that?
I actually use Acuity Scheduling, but you can use Calendly as well. I'm product agnostic. What fits your world. I like to talk about ideas and concepts, and the online calendar concept, they have a ton of them out there. Find one that fits your workflow and your budget.
That's, I sometimes have this sense that one of the reasons courts haven't moved more quickly to providing a greater array of services online or through the internet is that they're somewhat daunted by the technology. But the technology you are using is largely familiar names. I mean, you're using Zoom, you're using Slack, you're using Microsoft Teams. Yeah, it's a different world now when it comes to these different technologies. I always like to tell them, but don't try and integrate everything right off the bat. I mean, if you start with just building yourself a website, getting an online calendar and a video integration, you're going to spend less than $500 a year, and you're going to change the entire justice system with those 3 products that cost you no more than $500 a year. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Again, that same online calendar I talked to you about on the criminal side, I use it on the civil side. I mean, you've been a lawyer for quite some time and following this practice of law. Why do we still have to pick up a phone or go to the courthouse to get that red book that the minute clerk has that keeps all the dates and erases and handwrites and erases and handwrites? When I took the bench, I never knew what was coming up because they had this one person with this one red book. So I took it. I was not well liked for the first few weeks, but by the time that my civil minute clerk retired, she was converting documents to PDF and emailing them to me. But that simple process of taking my calendar, which is set a year in advance,
I put online and I started telling lawyers, hey, look, go online, call opposing counsel, pick the date that works for you all, put it on the rule to show cause, mail the rule to show cause in, and click a button and dump it on your Outlet calendar. And if you want to come by video, there's a video link right there. Just send me a letter, fax me a letter letting me know that you're going to come. And that way we can make the system, again, more efficient, more effective, and lawyers can spend they can spend 10 minutes instead of 2 hours plus parking and bill their clients.
Yeah.
So just the same $150 I told you about that makes the criminal justice system more efficient and more effective is the exact same product that I use for the civil side of it.
And you were conducting hearings by video conference before you had to, right? I mean, in some cases, you were using video conferencing for certain kinds of proceedings before the courts were shut down.
I predominantly used and exclusively used the video conferencing for pretrial conferences. Did not use them for motion hearings, although we are using that now for motion hearings because there's no reason you can't. But there's something to be said about being there in person and being in the flesh and seeing the nuance. So again, I think at the end of this, we'll have a much more efficient and more effective system. I don't think that we will become a 100% virtual court, but there will certainly be aspects of this that will carry through and make our system a better system of justice.
Yeah. So if I had this right, literally about a week before the court shut down, the physical courts shut down in Louisiana, you had launched a website on the URL courtonline.us.
That's right.
I don't know if was that prescient or were you anticipating?
I was actually, so that's probably the second or third website we built.
Yeah, right.
And I have one, smartsupervision.us or reentrycourt.us, which is for my criminal side of things that makes that system more efficient. So I figured, hey, why don't I build one for the civil side of it that makes it easier as well? And it just so happened that our courthouse was going to shut down. So I flipped it and just simply made it a jurisdiction specific as opposed to my website, just propped it up so that everybody could use it.
So what's the idea of that site? I mean, if I go to that site right now, there's a picture of the courthouse and there's a little button that says join video conference.
Yeah, it's about ease of use. So if you go to the court's website or most court websites that were built 10 years ago, and they're really just bogged down with information that people don't need. And so I just wanted to make it a simple user interface that everybody could go to for quick and easy information. So if you need to join a video conference, now every judge is available by video conference. Click this button. Here's a standing order that tells you need to be properly attired. Your clients can't be hiding in the background. You can't record this stuff. Just give you a vehicle to join video conferences in a very easy way. It also has all of the orders from the governor, from the Louisiana Supreme Court, and from our 24th Judicial District Court right there on the front page so that you can find out what's going on. And as these orders change, and if there's another extension, we will put that on within 5 minutes of receiving the email from our chief judges. And it just makes it more easy to find information. It's got all the necessary links to the clerk of court, to the Supreme Court, to all the various agencies that you need. And then it also enables you to actually request public access. So if there's a hearing, something that you want to watch or you want to see, go on there, simply send us an email and we'll accommodate you to make sure that you're able to see that hearing so that we can have access to justice as well for folks that want to come in and see what's going on.
Yeah. So public access meaning journalists or members of the public or anybody who wants to attend one of these virtual conferences can do it by shooting you an email, basically.
Yeah, they can shoot us an email and so our courthouse is shut down, but it's not shut down. Obviously, you still have to have some folks in there. So we can still practice social distancing and open the courtroom and play it so that you can watch whatever you feel like watching.
Right. So one of the innovations that you introduced was the ability to take guilty pleas remotely. How does that work?
So we had legislation authorized about 3 years ago that permit the courts to take guilty pleas and for folks that are incarcerated. So this enables the courts to, in the event that somebody was serving a very lengthy sentence and there was something that was going to be run concurrent, no reason to drive 100, 200 miles to receive concurrent time. If everybody consented, that defendant would be allowed to take a guilty plea remotely. So in this situation, how do you actually do that when you can't transport anybody? The lawyers are remote, the court reporters are remote, the judge is remote. So it's very, very challenging to get people's signatures. So we reached out to a number of organizations, and Document decided that they were going to help us essentially digitize our plea of guilty form.
Document is the legal technology startup started by Dorna Moini, and they have their own document automation platform, and so that's who Document. Just in interjecting that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Thank you. We also reached out to Community Lawyer, and they've been wonderful as well. And so she took the form for us and essentially created this wonderful user interface where now we have the attorneys who had already been negotiating these pleas prior to the shutdown, reached an agreement. So now we're able to bring everybody online, including the jail. We are then able to take the defense attorney and the criminal defendant and place them into a separate virtual room, so that the defense attorney and his or her client can have an attorney-client privileged communication. And if they decide that plea that they were working on before the shutdown is something that person is still interested in, the defense attorney will go on to that courtonline.us website that we just talked about, click a button, fill out the plea of guilty form, and it obviously converts into a PDF that looks like a pleading that we all are familiar with. Mm-hmm. And then that defense attorney will then email it or Slack it to our criminal minute clerk. The criminal minute clerk will email it to the jail. I have a copy if it's been slacked. And while I am going over the oral colloquy with the criminal defendant on the record, on video, the jail prints it and brings it to the defendant, who signs it. They scan it, e-file it, and I e-sign it, and we are done.
And you're able to do this in part because the jail has iPads for the prisoners to use.
Well, they did not until the building shut down.
Oh, they did not until the building shut down. Oh, I see.
Yeah, no, we ran around and I grabbed an old iPad, and they had somebody had an old Android, and we got them set up on the Wi-Fi. And because of the history that we've had with our jail and another great partnership, we actually had them already on an online calendar, so my counselors could schedule meetings to visit in person with the jail, so that we cut down on the waste of time for our counselors and everybody just sitting around waiting for transport to occur.
And so many of the principals in this, or participants in this, are communicating via Slack. Is that right?
Yeah, we use Slack. You can use any collaboration tool. Again, product agnostic. Yeah. But it's great. We've got the DA, the public defenders, the minute clerk, my assistant, probation and parole, the judge, my law clerk. Everybody's on the same channel, same workspace, and then we just change up the channels depending upon where we are. So it's been extremely helpful during this time, because when all of the lawyers are filing their motions to reduce bond, the minute clerk is able to say, new filing. The public defender is able to say, yeah, that's mine. We all say, y'all want to jump on Zoom in an hour? We all jump on, we handle the motion to reduce bond.
Yeah. And I hear you say, yeah, you can use your product agnostic. You can use any kind of technology that works for this. But I keep thinking about what I've seen in terms of my experience in terms of courts purchasing technology, and mm-hmm. it's this cumbersome process of putting a project out to bid, and some heavy vendor coming in with my product will do everything from soup to nuts. Yep. And then you get it, it takes years to get it going, and then it doesn't work once you do get it going. So
I've been through those pain points.
Yeah. I mean, you're being nimble here. I mean, you're not having to go through red tape, I guess, to get this stuff going.
No, I don't have to go through red tape, but you need to make sure that you're purchasing the right products. Right. And so, part of the challenge of this that I've only learned through, falling on my face a bunch of times, is what you said. Is it on state contract? Is it not on state contract? Does it reach the levels of public bid or not? We always have to remember, while I'm trying to build our business and make our business better, we are not a business. We are a government entity. So I've then got to worry about public records being compliant with public record requests, being compliant with retention rates. And so those types of things are important. So the free versions of all these products are wonderful, but they don't work in our world because of all those different challenges that we've, or considerations, not necessarily challenges that I've just run through.
Yeah. So how do you address those kinds of concerns about retention and public access and all that? I mean, I understand the public access part that we talked about briefly before, but there's more to it than that.
You find the right products that have those right settings. Again, the free versions do not have those settings. And so you have to look at what level of product do those types of options become available.
Yeah. But so you're using, as you say, Slack and Zoom yeah. and these other things sure. that the even cumulatively, the overall cost, it's got to be pretty cheap.
Yeah, no, look, I can literally start your tech stack at 500 and start climbing based upon your needs. I mean, I've got SurveyMonkey. I use Sign, which is a check-in system that enables us to actually see when people get to our building, how long they were there, what they were there for. I've expanded our calendaring to probably 35 calendars because as you scale, you need to start scaling and working through all these different complications. We've got a lot of different products that we can start spending some money, but when you're dealing with a jurisdiction our size, even if you're to the $10,000 to $15,000 a year, when you think about how much technology can expand your services and actually make what we have more efficient and more effective, it's a drop in the bucket when dealing with the types of budgets that we deal with on a daily basis.
We'll get back to my interview in just a moment, but first, let's take a break to hear from the sponsors who generously support LawNext. And now, let's continue this week's interview. You mentioned earlier the Smart Supervision website, and
yes.
I know your court has a Smart Supervision program that's really focused on reducing recidivism, and just in response to the coronavirus crisis over the last few weeks, you've had an issue come up of how do you stay in touch with probationers, and you've again come up with a tech solution to that.
Yes, the tech solution that we'll talk about, the chatbot, was on my list of my 10 to 20 year projects, and that was just on there.
Yeah.
So some of these had to get advanced pretty quickly. Right now, because we already had everybody on these video conferencing platforms and already had our probationers very familiar with the utilization of these different technologies that we've placed on a number of their phones, including a simple, we went through the native app process, which is very expensive and not very nimble. So I got away from that, and on that website, we built a web page that's private in the sense that you're not going to find it. But it's not private. We simply save that URL to the probationer's cell phone, and it looks like an app, and it has every single phone number, email, document, 24/7 mental health. They can text with somebody back and forth 24/7 as their needs come up. And all of that is part of the $150, $200 website that we have. And it looks like an app, and we can change the information as information changes. So that's been very useful in our world, and it costs next to nothing to do. Because of that, again, our probationers and participants are very familiar with using their phones during probation. And so one of the things that we have a challenge with right now is how do you supervise 400 participants without actually being able to see them physically on a daily basis as we normally did. And that was a challenge. But thankfully, our probation and parole and our counselors rose to that challenge and just started utilizing, again, a video conferencing platform and still holding one-on-one case management, still holding groups. Because of the online calendaring, they're able to send those out, send out the text and email reminders. And even with all of that, there's still no way to touch 400 people in real time all the time to make sure that they're safe and our community's safe. And so one of the things I've always wanted to build was a chat bot that essentially acted like a case manager, but never got around to doing it, never had a chance to do it. So I reached out and put a call out to Gabe Tenenbaum. I'm sure you know Gabe.
I know Gabe well.
And he sent an email out to his folks that he knows out in the tech world. And Tom from LawDroid decided to help. And within 3 weeks, we have a functioning chatbot that is texting folks. And it's very simple. It's very basic. It says, "Are you doing okay?" This is your smart supervision team, just making sure that you're okay. If they answer yes, it says, "Great job, way to go. We'll talk to you soon." If it says no, then it asks the probationer, "Hey, look, make sure you call your probation officer and your counselor. Here's the phone number, even though we know they have it. Just push this button and we call." And it actually immediately texts our case managers, our counselors, and our probation officer. And actually next week, we'll hopefully have a Slack integration. Tom's working on that for us. And we will then be able to respond in real time to the needs of an individual before there's a new victim. And that's really what this is all about, reducing the amount of victims in our community and being able to respond in real time to the needs of individuals, because there are real barriers and we need to help people succeed. That doesn't remove accountability. I always like to say, holding somebody accountable and caring about them are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. Yeah. And Gabe is the director of the Institute of Law Practice Technology and Innovation is his formal title. He's at Suffolk Law School up my way in the Boston area. And also worth mentioning, I think, is that we talked about Documate and Dorna Moini earlier, and we were just talking about Tom Martin and his company LawDroid. They all did this for you for free, right?
Yeah, everybody's been incredible. They've stepped up and said, "How can we help?"
And I'd heard from Tom a little bit, and who told me some more details about it, the development of this. And I mean, they really, it was kind of a classic sprint in a way. I mean, it was they got something put together pretty quickly. The first go around, as I understood it, it didn't quite work as they wanted to, and spent a few more days working on it, and then it's all gone well.
Yeah, the longer I do this, the more I realize that you'll never stop iterating and changing and making it better and making it better. Right now we're talking to him about, all right, well, it goes out every week at 1 p.m., every Monday at 1 p.m. Can we vary it? Can it go every 5 or 10 days? Can we do it based upon phases? Because not everybody needs to be touched every day or every week. Some of our folks that have been in our program for quite some time, maybe we only need to touch them, in a couple of weeks. And so as he's been building it out, it's been a great just exercise in the next iteration. And at the end of the day, the final product is not going to cost us all that much on an ongoing basis. So it's, it'll be a manageable cost to any specialty court as the years go by, which is a great part of being part of the building team, is being able to find out what is scalable and what's cost effective, because I tend to get into these, as you just said, these big, huge projects where we can't afford anything.
Yeah.
So, affordability and scalability are really important when building these things. And just because my jurisdiction can afford it doesn't mean the next jurisdiction can afford it. And that's really something that I've always focused on, is please don't think about just my jurisdiction. Think about everybody's jurisdiction and how can we roll this out to, a more rural community who could use this every day.
So how has this, to what extent has this carried over into other courts within Louisiana or even outside of Louisiana? What interest has there been in what you're doing?
Oh, a tremendous amount of interest everywhere. The judges in the state of Louisiana have been working day and night to get these types of systems in place in their jurisdictions. And I would say I can't say 100%, but darn near 100%. Judges have now been propping up all their different hearings by video, including, juvenile and domestic and civil and criminal. So the judges in Louisiana are working very hard, and I'm sure they are around the country as well. I've had folks from other states reach out, had some folks from Europe reach out just to kind of find out what's going on and how it's working here, and and how they can possibly utilize some of these different off-the-shelf products to do something similar. And again, it's really just changing the mindset and reimagining the system and repurposing these products that already exist in the private sector and repurposing them for the public sector.
I mean, you came onto the bench in 2013. Have you been seeing the mindset around using these kinds of tools changing over the years, or has there just suddenly been, kind of overnight, a whole new perspective on this?
Well, certainly overnight, there's been a whole new perspective on this, but that doesn't mean folks haven't been looking at it for years. It's just, with any type of system that's been around for hundreds of years, it takes a little bit. And I joke sometimes to say my 20-year project has now become a 2-month project.
Right. Yeah.
So not much sleep, not much rest.
Yeah. Speaking of that 20-year, I mean, you sent me before we talked an outline of some of the projects that you've been working on and still want to work on. What are some of the big ones that you have yet to tackle, or have yet to maybe successfully tackle if you've tackled them?
One of the kind of just overarching themes is just learning about all the different products that are out there and how to begin to integrate these off-the-shelf products. Again, it's really difficult to build one case management system, and I always try and steer people away from that, because every agency has their own case management system, and it's really difficult. So I'm never looking to replace the official government record from the, whether it's the clerk of court system or the sheriff's system. What I'm always looking to do is what type of products exist out there to layer on top to help us become more efficient and more effective. So just from the intake process of, when somebody gets on one of these probation programs, or when they come to your courtroom, how do they check in? I mean, folks check in still with pen and paper for most places. Yeah. How do you keep a record of that? How do you know who got there and when they got there? So just converting all these different forms into simple surveys. We've been utilizing, right before the shutdown, I started utilizing QR codes, which they don't cost anything. And if you already have your website built, so when somebody's placed on probation in your courtroom and they plead guilty and you place them on probation, we say about 5 minutes worth of directions of where to go next.
Right.
Go to this building, meet with this person, call this place, email these people. Well, nobody remembers that. And the piece of paper that they have, they can't figure out because there's 6 pieces of paper they're holding in their hand, not just one. And so I started putting a QR code outside. So they
outside your courtroom, right outside your courtroom.
Yeah, right outside the courtroom. Yeah. As soon as they walk out the door, it's now on the screen. And if you don't have a screen, print a piece of paper and stick it to your wall. And they pull out their phone, and it actually pulls up that web page that they can push a button, and it actually will take them with directions to the location that they need to go to. It'll have the name and phone number that they can push a button and call that person. And it'll actually have a copy of all the documents that they need to succeed on that probation program right there. And it's just me adding another web page to that $200 website that I built. So things like that are simple solutions that we've never thought about utilizing in the justice system for whatever reason.
What about in domestic matters? I mean, this is a difficult time for certainly people who have been in situations that are susceptible to domestic abuse or domestic violence. But are you looking at better ways of addressing those kinds of cases?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the challenges that we've been working through is how do you get folks served with protective orders? And so how do you get them served before they leave jail? How do you hold these hearings when somebody's arrested in the state of Louisiana? There's what's called a Gwen's Law hearing, where you have to hold a hearing to determine whether or not they're entitled to bond and whether or not we're going to give them a protective order. Well, how do you serve them with those protective orders? How do you do this? And so that has been part of this working through how do we digitize these forms? Where do we put these forms? How do you work with the various players? How do you implement e-signature or not? What type of legislation exists to permit you to do these types of things? If there's no legislation, what type of orders may you need temporarily to allow you to go down these? And so it's a great exercise in just how do we make the system more efficient? And how about when this is all over, when the buildings open back up? How are we going to serve everybody, Bob? That's a question. How do you get folks served to come back to the courthouse? And so we need to start thinking about, should we or should we not start including email service as a foremost service? How do you protect that type of thing? So these are just things that we need to think through. So how do we hold 100 on one day any longer with the courts? 100 in one courtroom is not going to be possible anymore. And so how do we start using those great online calendaring systems to start staggering our dockets a little bit better? And we talked a little bit about the check-in system that we use in the criminal justice system. Well, we can also start using that in the criminal justice system on a regular docket day, and also on the civil side, where we can have folks check in, and we will then be able to simply ask them, hey, look, you can go walk around the neighborhood, you can go sit downstairs. If there's enough room in the courtroom, you can hang out here. But when your case is ready or about to be ready, we can actually use that system to send you a text letting you know, hey, your case is about to be called. And that way you can come back when your case is ready. So that'll enable us to really focus on employing the best practices that we know about for social distancing.
Judge Schlegel, do you think that as a result of what we're going through right now, there will be parts of business as usual that we're not ever going to go back to in the courts?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Again, those large dockets we just talked about, I don't see that happening again. Yeah. It's going to be tough to have jury trials anytime soon. And I'm not talking about from just the potential of having them. I mean, our buildings will open in the next month or two, hopefully. But when that occurs, it's going to be tough to ask 100 people from your community to come to a courthouse and then bring 20 or 30 of them up and put them in close quarters in the jury box to have this voir dire. And then if you're lucky enough to be selected for the jury, then to put you in a smaller room for the next 3 or 4 days and feed you and have you pass food to each other. It's going to be hard to get folks to feel comfortable about that.
Right.
And if somebody has a cold, which is not COVID related, but just the general common cold, it's going to be tough for folks to get over that fear, understandably. And how are we going to handle that as a community? Because we also have constitutional rights to jury trials.
Right. I mean, you also, as you mentioned at the beginning, you're a former trial lawyer, and there must be parts of the classic litigation system that you don't want to see go away, I would imagine.
No, that's why I think that there is something to be said about being in the courtroom. But there's also no reason that you need to be in the courtroom for a motion to compel. Right. Or, a simple motion where you have 1 or 2 exhibits that can be pre-filed and have evidentiary rulings ahead. We don't walk into these courtrooms cold. We're pretty prepared when we walk into the courtrooms. We've reviewed the memorandums. We've reviewed the exhibits attached to those memorandums. And we've studied it. So when you come in, there's really no reason that you can't do that by video to reduce the amount of folks that come through the courthouse. That said, when you start getting into witness testimony, the dynamic changes. Yeah. And being able to walk up to that witness chair and handing an exhibit and being able to look at the jury and look at the witness, or even if it's not a jury trial, look at the trier of fact as you're having that conversation with the witness and being able to feed off of everything that you're observing that you cannot observe through a video camera. So there's certainly going to be times that it's important to be in a courtroom. And we're just going to have to figure out when that is and what's required. And then again, you have to look at what your statutory scheme looks like in your state to determine what is permitted and what is not permitted. And sometimes it's just silent. Right. And you don't have an answer for folks.
Yeah. Yep. We're just about out of time here, but I just wanted to throw it back to you. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share, or anything else we haven't talked about that you wish we had?
Yeah, just start easy, start small, start scaling from there as you're working through it. And most importantly, build those partnerships if you haven't built them already with your justice partners. Because again, technology is a tool, it's not a replacement. And so those partnerships are really important. One of the other challenges that we are going to have as we go forward, if we get into this witness remote testimony or more remote proceedings, is verifying that the individual on the other side of the screen is who they say they are. So that'll be an interesting thing to think through. In the state of Louisiana, we have digital IDs permitted by law. We have one of the most robust ones in the country. I'm actually been talking with the folks that designed that and asking them to modify the product, which they have done so for demo purposes, so that we could actually verify remotely from our end that you are who you say you are by you showing your digital ID with a generated code, and actually be able to print a PDF that is generated by the official Department of Motor Vehicle record and place it into the record to make sure that you are who you say you are. Now, the text there, but not necessarily the hurdles, whether it's legislative or simply permission from the governor and the right parties. So that's just another interesting thing that you have to start thinking through when dealing with remote testimony.
So the tech would be, they would have something that they would actually hold up to the video, or how would they?
So no, that they could do that now, but the tech would be, you would push a button which would generate a random code. The court on the other end would type in that random code that was just generated for this one-time use, and it would actually pull up a picture of that individual with the verifying information so that you could verify that that is the person in front of you.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's just remote testimony is an interesting concept. Where can you see the individual's hands? What are they looking at? Right. Is the screen on? Is it not on? Who's hiding? Who's holding up flashcards? Mm-hmm. Are they wearing an Apple Watch or some sort of Android watch that you need to make sure that you're looking out for?
Right. Yeah. Well, may you live in interesting times, they say. we are doing that, if nothing else. Well, I really appreciate your taking the time to talk with me today, and I appreciate everything you're doing to serve the people in your courts and to help push the courts forward.
Yeah, no, thank you, Bob. And if anybody needs any help or wants to talk to me, I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime to help you work through these thoughts. It's our community. Yeah,
and I'll put links to your court websites in the show notes for this episode if people want to find those as well. Well, thanks again to Judge Scott Schlegel for taking the time to be with us today. Thanks also to our producer, Populous Radio, and Ben Ambrogi for putting together and editing the show. That's it for this week. This is Bob Ambrogi.